that somebody's got a finger right here, and you can only see it. Who got the story. Jonathan, did you know that Sarah's going to a cornea specialist tomorrow?
I did not.
So pray that her vision is going to come back.
I just misspelled it. Cornea, I spelled it corona. A corona specialist.
You watched, right? You said the bulletin.
Okay.
I texted you yesterday.
Okay.
She don't tell you everything, I guess.
No, well, on Saturdays and Sundays, we're a lot of time running, trying to spend time, that we hadn't been able to see each other all week. And okie doke. All right, we are continuing our study of Old Testament book by book. We're now going into the books of poetry. These books of poetry, there'll be 5. There'll be Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. These books do not chronologically follow the previous books that we've been talking about. Matter of fact, these books were written during the time of the ones that we were just talking about. So what were the preceding books, the Chronicles and the Kings and that sort of thing. These books were actually they were written, and when it says books of poetry, this is not like poetry that you and I understand as far as English poetry is concerned. Poetry has rhythm and meter and rhyme, and these books of poetry are not written like that, but they're more or less metaphoric in some ways. Go to Psalm chapter 15. Or they're characterized by parallelism too. They're parallel, putting 2 things next to one another, which is kind of what remember a parable is to lay a story beside another story, and it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. It's very similar to the way the books of poetry are written. But yeah, if you get to Psalm 15 and verse 1, read that for us.
15 verse 1.
Yeah.
The Lord who shall sojourn in thy tabernacle, who shall dwell in thy holy hill.
Who's going to dwell in your holy hill? Now, we understand the tabernacle and the holy hill today as church, right? That's his holy place. That's, we are a church that's set upon a hill. And so what I'm saying here is that it's parallel. It's paralleling 2 things. It's paralleling who's going to abide in your tabernacle, who's going to abide in your holy hill. That's the kind of poetry this is. The tabernacle and the holy hill are essentially the same place. They are the exact same place. It's talking about that collection or that location where his church will be. And of course, we know that today his church spiritually is us, and we are a city that is set upon a hill, right? That's what we're supposed to be. But as we look into some of the books of poetry, we're not going to be able to spend a ton of time now, and there's not a lot in the curriculum about these books, and that's what me and Huey were talking about a while ago. So what we might do if we do run out of time, if we run out of material before we run out of time, we might just go through and discuss some of your favorite Psalms or Proverbs or something like that. We'll just talk about it as a group and have a discussion about these things. Because these books, first and foremost, I do want to mention this. These books are amazing resources for the Christian to go back to and to meditate upon. If you don't have a devotion, a daily devotion that you look at, or maybe a reading schedule, remember this. And I was told this a long time ago, but Proverbs has 31 chapters. Has 31 chapters. There's 31 days in the longest month. So if you don't have a devotion, it might be a good idea to pick what day it is. If it's the 17th, go read chapter 17 of Proverbs. Meditate upon it. Look into it and study it. It's a wonderful way, just like I said, they're truths. And these truths are not dying. They're not dead truths. The Proverbs and the Psalms are actually songs that they would sing. They were songs of lament, songs of praise, songs of thanksgiving. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's wonderful for the Christian, for you and I, if nothing else, if for no other reason, than to just go back and meditate upon the words in these books of poetry. Like I said, and to read through the book of Job. Let's look at Job was the man of patience. That's what that says. Who was the man of patience? That would be Job. James chapter 5 and verse 11 says, have you heard of the patience of Job? When we talk about Job and patience together, if any of us have read it, which I trust that all of us have read that book, we understand the amount of patience that this man had after losing everything, after literally being everything that he had being taken away from him. He never, ever turned aside from God. Now, he blamed God. There were some times in the book of Job where he blamed God, and he went through this kind of a roller coaster of emotions. One minute he would be upset, not understanding why things were happening because he understood his innocence, and the next minute he would be sorry and lamenting about the very fact that he even thought those things that negative about God. He was a man who struggled, and what we're going to learn about the book of Job, or from the book of Job, is that the righteous do suffer. That's just all there is to it. The righteous are going to suffer. Let's look at Job chapter 1 and verse 22, and if you're there, go ahead and read it. It might be Job chapter 1, might not be verse 22. Let me go over there and look. I might have done another typo. I apologize about that.
In all this, Job sinned not.
Yeah, there you go.
Charged God foolish.
Okay. And all of this, he was an upright man. And that's what the verse 1 says. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was perfect and upright. One that feared God. He reverenced God. That's a kind of fear. It's not a fear like he was afraid of him, but this is a reverential fear. And one who eschewed evil. This man, like I said, upright and perfect. He reverenced God. He eschewed evil. He was a righteous man. And yet he suffered. And what we're going to see, if you look through the book of Job, you're going to see in chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 is kind of like his introduction of who he is. And then it switches pages around verse 6 in chapter 1. And what we're going to see is kind of like a council meeting taking place in heaven. It kind of takes you into this heavenly scene where God's staff, I'll say it like that, are standing there and discussing things. It's kind of like a staff meeting taking place in heaven. And then Satan, or as the Old Testament pronounces it, the Satan, he comes forward and he says, the reason that Job is so good is because he has all these things. If you'll just take all these things away from him, he's not going to serve you anymore. And God had so much trust in Job and in his faithfulness that he actually gave Satan the privilege to go, and he said, you can take everything from him, but don't touch him. Don't take his life. Don't take his life from him. Don't kill him. Take everything you want. Take anything you want. And what do we see as far as his losses? His losses, they're going to include his property and his children. You're going to see that from verses 13 down to 22. Look at verse 3. Somebody read verse 3, chapter 1.
His substance also 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the East.
Wow. So the wealthiest man in the East, he had all of this, and he was upright and righteous, and then immediately following this, he begins to lose it. Verses 13 through 22, he loses his children, he loses his livestock and his property.
John,
Yes, sir.
you know, there's another lesson in this right here too, is when he comes into the presence of God and the Son of God, and God asks him where he's been. I've been going to and fro upon all the earth. He's looking for somebody to lead astray.
Yeah.
I think that's being made there.
Yeah, he's looking.
If you consider Job.
He's an adversary, and he has been since the garden, hasn't he? I mean, he was looking for somebody to trip up, and he's been looking for somebody to trip up ever since the beginning. That's his characteristic. Yeah, that's his character. I mean, that's who he is. He's always wanting Miss Frida.
He circles the earth, thinking who he made a fire.
That's right. 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8. That's right.
But we're the ones that gives him that opportunity.
Right, because what's the first part of that verse say, Gary Don? He says he circles the earth, but right before that, it tells the Christian to be sober and to be vigilant, to be watchful. Why? Because your adversary, the devil,
Is a roaring lion.
yeah, he's a roaring lion, and he's going about seeking whom he may devour. That's his character. He's always been this way. Job, let me tell you something about Job, and I've been excited about this all week because I remember just how, I guess, mind blown I was. I had probably one of the best teachers in the world, in my opinion, to sit down and go through the verses of Job with me. And this is Brother Dan Cates. This is Curtis Cates' son. Curtis Cates wrote a book. Well, a book, and I'm not kidding when I say that, on the book of Job, and it's called A Few Minutes with Job. Just a few minutes with Job. His son taught the class, and he shares the same zeal as Brother Curtis Cates did about this book. And he goes on to paint this picture, and he shows the very first thing that we did before we even opened the book. He gets a slideshow up, and he goes through several slides of battles, wars that have been fought over the period of time, and photographs that have actually been taken of that battlefield. And then, you see bodies laying everywhere. They were very real photographs. And then afterward, he says, it was a battle. It was a battlefield. There was an absolute battle going on, but he said, what we're going to see in the book of Job is not the men who are dead upon the battlefield that are all laying there. Job is the battlefield himself upon which Satan and God are fighting. I kept that illustration of that book throughout the rest of the entire time that I read the book. And as you go through and you see the battle between God and Satan, using Job literally as the battlefield, it's so eye-opening. And like I said, it was a monumental moment for me. And I never looked at that book again the same way, because you're right. We always talk about him being beat up, and we always talk about him being, going through the worst. And so when I looked at those slides to begin with, I was just thinking, okay, he's going to tell me that the soldiers that Job represents the soldiers on the battlefield that are dead or dying or suffering. No, Job is the battlefield upon which the fight was fought. Wow. That was eye-opening to me. And so, yeah, I'm glad I got to share it with you. But anyway, chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Not only after he loses his property, being the wealthiest man in the East, he loses all of his children. Then Satan comes and he takes his health. And that's what you'll see in verses 1 through 10 of chapter 2. And then if you move into chapter 3 is a lament of Job. He is, after losing everything and after having gone through all of the things that he's gone through, he doesn't even want to live. I put there on the slide, he loses his desire to live. And as you read through it, that's what you'll say. It says, let the day perish with it wherein I was born. Let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which which it was said, there is a man-child conceived. I don't even want to go back all the way to the conception and erase that day. I want us to understand something. Job is a righteous man, but he's going through suffering. He's going through hard times, and he has a weak moment. Even so weak that he wishes he wasn't born. We're going to suffer, y'all. We're going to have hard times. And there's going to be times when you and I hurt. It's real and it's expected, especially of the man of God. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. Yes, sir.
Job's wife,
Yeah.
in the picture, and
Yeah.
a lot of people see her as against Job, say, well, go ahead and confess your sins and die, Go ahead and just die. But if we got real good friends, sometimes they might say to us, well, you just go ahead and give up if that's the way you feel about it,
Yeah.
And so she might have been, I don't know,
She may have been seeing the pain and the hardship.
An encouragement to it.
Yeah.
To not give up.
When we hear, when we hear the words of Job's wife, they can be taken either way. Immediately when we hear it, though, the very first thing that we read, when we see someone saying, curse God and die, we turn our ear from it. But that's a great point. That's a great point. Sometimes whenever, I have my cousin will call me and he's going through a hard time, and I'll say, yeah, well, just throw it all in the can, man. Just give up now, I guess. You're gonna give up on everything you worked so hard for. That's and it could have been in that character that she said those words. But then like I say, you hear it, curse God and die. You think, wow, where's her mindset at? Where's her head at?
But Job told her, said, well, you just talking like a foolish woman.
Yeah.
That's something a foolish woman would say, but, it could have been either way.
Yeah, it could have been. You're right. Absolutely. That's a good point. Sometimes our friends will tell us, hey, go ahead and just give up. Go ahead, just throw it all away, man. Everything that you've worked so hard for, why don't you just go ahead and just throw it just walk away from it. Out of sarcasm. And so, I've never really even entertained the idea that could be sarcasm, but yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, because he lost everything but his wife. Now I've heard some, semi-comical things about that point too. They say, well, if she was a nagging wife, then Satan's not going to take her away, because that would just drive him even more crazy, so, but, that has something to say. Yeah, he took Satan took everything. God allowed everything to be taken from Job, but then Satan decided not to take his wife. Something to think about there. And then from chapters 4 through 37, you're going to meet three of Job's friends. It's Eliphaz, Bildad, and yeah. And so you're going to see these three friends over the next few chapters. What it'll be is one will have an accusation, and these were far out accusations. The reason, they come to him. The scripture says that they come to him and they see his condition, and from afar they couldn't even recognize who he was because of all the things that had been going on with him. They rent their clothes and went and sat down with him among the ashes. They sat down with him and mourned with him. And so he's going through a hard time. His friends show up and they're sitting there with him. But then they begin to say, well, you're obviously going through this because you've sinned some great sin. You're obviously going through this because you've done. Job maintained his innocence throughout the entire book. Throughout the entire book, throughout this entire conversation that you see him having with his friends, like I said, you'll see an accusation given by a friend, and then you'll see Job's response. And then you'll see another accusation given by his friend, and then you'll see Job's response. Same thing. It goes back and forth with these three friends. Then you have Elihu. He comes up and he shows up, and then in verses or in chapters 38 through 42, you're going to see God answering Job's question because he's tired and he's kind of given up on his friends and their advice and their talking. So he turns to God and he demands an answer from God, that God give him an answer as to why he's going through what he's going through. And then in chapters 38 through 42, you're going to see God come to Job, and he's going to begin by showing him, it kind of goes back to like this picture of creation, and he shows him how everything kind of came into being and how all of the world is because of God, and everything that works is because of God. And even so much so in the eating habits of animals and how they do what they do, and creation in and of itself functioning because God is its creator. And then after God's answer, Job repents from his thoughts and his negative thoughts toward God about why he's suffering. And he realizes that God is good, and God is not just good sometimes, but he's good all the time. He's good all the time. There's a lot of good stuff that we can learn from that book. Really good.
The youngest guy, Ehud or Elhud,
Yeah.
He pointed out the fact that those other three friends were older than Job's father. They were old, they were ancient men. So they were a good bit older than Job and Ehud. But the thing is, the young guy, he kept quiet. And wasn't like me always but me. But he kept quiet, and then he put his part in, which really wasn't any better than the others.
Right. Look at
Jonathan, before you
go ahead.
I want to go back to what the wife said.
Okay.
After he answered her and so forth.
Okay.
Verse 10, he says, What shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?
Right.
That's a profound statement. You know, sometimes something will happen to us, and we'll wonder why God put this upon us. And I think what Job is saying there is that, James talks about it, that God tries our faith. Don't you think God was trying Job's faith there by allowing Satan to do what he did to him?
Absolutely.
So, sometimes something bad will happen, or somebody will die, a close person will die to us, and we kind of wonder why God let this happen. Why did God do this? Why did God put this upon me?
Yeah.
Well,
I think sometimes we go through circumstances, and when we fail, okay, before I say that, it's God's job, and it has always been God's job to reveal. And it's always been Satan's job. It's always been his character to conceal, to hide. When we go through circumstances and sometimes we fall, one thing that Heather's mother said not too long ago, and I really like that. She said, failure, it's not failure, it's a lesson learned. When we go through circumstances and we fall, sometimes I like to look at it as God showing me where I might need to strengthen myself to become a little bit better, to get better. If I'm tested and I fail that test, it's not so much that I'm a failure and I have to walk around with my head down, but it's maybe a way that God is showing me there's a weakness right here that you need to work on. There's a part right here in your life that maybe needs to be strengthened. And I think that's what you're saying there, is that God allows us to be tested sometimes to see where we're at, but also sometimes, like in this circumstance with Job, to prove our faith. Who was he proving it to? Satan. Satan's the one that's mocking. Satan is the one that is laughing at us. Oh, he's only so faithful because of all the good stuff he's got. You take that away from him and he'll curse you. Take that away from you. And that's, so sometimes God allows us to go through circumstances to prove it. And you know what? There might be a battlefield. You might very well be a battlefield that Satan and God are working upon, just like Job. We very well could be being used. There's a spiritual world and warfare that is going on around us right now that we can't even see. I believe that wholeheartedly, that there is a very real spiritual realm with very real spiritual beings. And we don't know, we understand this side, this earthly side of things. We have no idea what's really going on behind the scenes. But there is an eternal, or it's not eternal, is it? There is a war against your soul. And the devil will stop at nothing to have it. He don't want you to be with God.
He's still going to and fro upon the earth.
That's right. That's right. And you know, he's still going to mess with you, and he's still going to be in your mind if you let him be there. We will pick up right there when we get back together on Wednesday. That was a good study. I appreciate y'all's time and attention.
We'll start
Daily
with
Bible
62.
readers, do what?
62.
I'll trust you. I'll trust you. Y'all hear that? Number 62. Daily Bible readers. Okay. There's a lot to be said about that book. A whole lot. A lot of good stuff. I love the ending. I love the way it ends. Because of him standing the test and not faltering, God sends his friends to him. Have Job pray for you. all those friends that doubted him, they had to go to Job. You want to reach me? Have Job talk to you for me. Talk to me for you.
Friends like that who need.
That's right. That's right. They had some far out accusations. They really did.